What is the scariest ghost story you ever heard? Story 1. So, not sure if scary, but really weird. 2 days after my grandfather died, the neighborhood security guard knocks on our door on a Sunday morning. He told us, "An old man came to your house earlier, knocked on your door for half an hour, and finally left. When I asked him what he wanted, he told me he needed to say goodbye to someone he had never had the chance to meet." We were all stunned, had no idea who this old man was, or who was he looking for. When the guard came in, he shouted, "That's the old man," pointing at a picture of my grandfather. My entire family froze for a minute. I'm not 100% sure if the guard was telling the truth, but I almost like believing that my granddad wanted to say goodbye to my newborn sister before resting in peace. Story 2. This is a story I do not often tell. I promise, sincerely, that this has scarred me for life, and although I have looked into psychological explanations for what I heard and natural explanations for what occurred, they remain unsatisfactory. When I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother I heard voices in it. They were not evil, but they were not familiar, and so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them when asking my mom. She figured they were just bumps in the night, and typical kids, nightmare material. I tried often to explain to her that it was more than that they sounded different from one another the way people's voices do. On some nights I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mom's bed with her. It was an added bonus that the bathroom was directly outside of her bedroom door for my late-night tinkles. I should add at this point that when walking out into the hall to go to the bathroom, you look directly down the stairs that would lead you into my living room on the first floor, as my mom's bedroom was on the second floor. On one such night, around Christmas, I awoke and felt the need to relieve myself. I walked out from the door and distinctly heard the phrase, "Look," and to my astonishment, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was cast upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other source. It was by itself, and I was transfixed by it. Being a little kid, and it only being a few days from Christmas, I knew what this light was. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house to know I was being a good boy? I was so excited I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as it began to creep off the wall and fade into the darkness in my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong masculine voice, different from the first, not at all like my father's. Not to say he isn't masculine, it was just distinctly different. It said, "Stop, right now." "Right, go back up those stairs." I listened, turned around, and what happened next, I am not sure I would believe if someone had told me this same story. After reaching the top of the stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running back to my mother's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there the whole night. When we awoke the next morning, the poinsettia lights, little Christmas flower lights that glowed red, my mother had put on the railing down the stairs were pulled straight down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed like a forceful tear, laying in a single pile. The dry sink in my living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried we had been the victims of a home invasion. My sister was crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There did not seem to be any reason this had happened. And then I saw it, and I kept quiet about it because I was so afraid that I could not force words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink which had been facing up, were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been worn, almost as if in a forceful grip. Something down there had grabbed it and threw it down. That was what the bang was. I was mortified. After that day, I never heard a single voice again. I do not like to imagine what was waiting downstairs for me that night, if it was anything at all, but I can tell you that the reality was that something had physically acted upon two things in my house near the bottom of that stairwell. After this, I had never heard another whisper again, which is sad because in some ways I would have liked to thank the man, masculine energy, that had stopped me from going down those stairs. This happened when I was 7, or 7.5, as I like to say at the time. I am 20 years old now, and because of this incident, I am still afraid of the dark, especially shadowy stairwells. Answer: it sounds to me like this could have been an intruder. The red light makes sense in that some military flashlights have red covers on them to make navigating in the dark more inconspicuous. What it sounds like to me is that an intruder got into your house, may have snuck in and hid while you were all still there, or picked the lock to your door, saw you as a kid, probably freaked out and told you to go back up the stairs, may have gotten angry about the situation and broke your dry sink. Story 3. Disclaimer: I submitted this in the past. All events are true. My house was built in 1904. It is a single-family home, wood frame setting on a concrete block foundation. I've been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and me have seen or heard in this house, this one event is my favorite. This happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his best friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music, but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening. They would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed, because I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement. The tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall into the living room, and out into the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now the basement is not clean. With full sight lines, there had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he is about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye he sees it. It is a shadowy figure right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you were in the presence of a spirit or ghost and you felt a bad vibe, to say quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, fudge you. I don't have time for this shoot." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he was walking out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open, and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. Still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean?" He went to work early tonight. He is already gone. Do you see his car anywhere? The next question they asked, so then who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house? Answer: I have a similar story of my sister and I. I was about 9 and my sister 10. We were washing the dishes manually one afternoon, maybe around 12 and in, when I saw a shadow on my peripheral vision. Thinking that maybe this is our uncle trying to scare us, I turned around quickly, but at the same time, my sister did the same thing. When we looked back, there was no one around. I asked why my sister turned around at the same time I did. She said she saw a shadow. So we looked for our uncle, and he was in the bedroom sleeping. There was no one else in the house except the three of us. Anyway, my family had all this weird experiences in this house, and we lived here only a little more than 1 year. Another weird experience was with my older brother. Our bedroom have windows on one side only, facing the street. During the evening, lights come in from the light post outside. We didn't have curtains, but the glasses on the windows were frosted, translucent. One time, I woke up in the middle of the night and there's this shadow on the window that moves from one end to the other, about the speed of someone running. It's not a constant movement. Maybe every couple of minutes the shadow will appear. This happened several times during that night until I fell asleep. In the morning, I told my brother about it because we share the same bedroom, and he said he witnessed the same thing. We tried to make sense of it, but it doesn't add up. We know that the shadow was not coming from the street because the street was steeply sloped and the shadow movement was not in an angle. We're thinking that whatever it is, it was moving in our yard. It was flat as opposed to the adjacent sloped street that was about 5 to 10 away. The thing that doesn't add up is that our yard had plenty of dried leaves at the time. But we didn't hear any noise, no footsteps, no crunching sound of dry leaves whatsoever whenever the shadow passed. Story 4. The story I know of the kid who borrowed his mom's phone to play with and ended up falling asleep in bed. Mom finds the kid sleeping, grabs her phone and looks at her phone pics to see a pic of this crazy half face close up, and the kid sleeping in the background. That one gives me the willies. Story 5. My friend told me a story his dad told him. Every day he would come home from school and he would be the first one there for at least an hour or two. One day, he walked in the front door and the TV was on and instantly turned off. He stood in the doorway for a second, turned around, and walked away. He didn't go back into the house until his parents came home. It gives me the heebies thinking about it. Answer: in my old house, things like this would happen all the time. I would be sitting on my computer, listening to music on my iPod while playing WoW. Periodically, at random times, the screen would flicker and my iPod's volume would adjust either up or down. I never thought anything of this until it continued to do so only in that house. Eventually, I just said, whatever. If it likes the song, it likes the song. However, inside this house, I had constant issues, one of which would be my sleeping in bed living room, depending on the night, and waking up to a low grumbling sound, feeling fear strike my heart and listening to the beat of my now panicked state. I would try and move to wake up and see what is happening. I couldn't. Not even my fingertips would move. Completely conscious and able to see silhouettes, I see my cat hiss, and I can feel myself being moved as light shines over my eyes and I fall asleep again. This particular case, I remember waking up and seeing a man standing on this 100 FT tree in my backyard. Real tall and slender, this guy. I muster up as much strength as I can, raise my hand up and give this guy the finger, after which I immediately fall back. Asleep with a thud. I hear my back door open on the second floor, and my dogs start barking, whining from the downstairs. I was 16 and 250 lbs. No one was moving me anywhere. Realistically speaking, of course. Anyways, to this day, I swear that thing was an ET because I saw it multiple times throughout my life, once standing in the kitchen window, which was 8 ft off the ground, that particular night, and in the first house I ever lived. I used to see him in my bedroom window, and he would talk to me. Scariest shoot I have experienced ended when I moved out of the last house I am now. 21. Edit. Kinda tipsy, but the night I gave E.T. the finger was the last time he came around. Story 6. During Hurricane Gustav, in '08 I think, I evacuated to a church in Baton Rouge with a friend and his family. At the same time, there was an entire nursing home's worth of old people staying in the church. My friend, his family, and myself all shared one room together. In this church, there was one bathroom that was large, similar to something that would be in an elementary school, a few stalls, a trough urinal, etc. One night during the storm, my friend and I made a trip to the bathroom. The lights had since gone out, middle of a hurricane and all. The church had a musty, eerie feel to it, kind of like when you turn out the AC in a house for a few days. The area surrounding the church was also dead quiet, since there was no electricity in the area. The bathroom was several halls over from our room, so we grabbed our flashlights and set out. While walking down one long hall, we shined our flashlights ahead, and there, at the end of the hall, sat an old man in a wheelchair in the middle of the night with no one around. Now, this hall was incredibly long, so we could make him out, but we couldn't really see all his facial features, etc. Once we grasped what we saw, we turned and looked at each other, semi-freaked out. Then, we shined our flashlights back to where he was, and there was nothing there. It was as if he vanished. No signs, no sound, nothing. Needless to say, we hauled Jerk back to the room. TLDR, old ghost man in wheelchair stared me down. I evacuated my evacuation. Story 7. The following is shamelessly stolen from a friend's experience shared on a Halloween ghost hunt because we weren't having any luck ourselves. His story. This friend and a few of his college buddies were going on a similar ghost hunt themselves and had heard about some graveyard where children taken down by their mother had been buried. The graveyard was located off the main road, so my friend parked his car on the side of the road, and the group, 5 or 7 people I believe, got out and followed the small path through the woods for a couple minutes to get to the graveyard. Once there, nothing. Exciting happened for the first 10 minutes or so, and they had tried everything the website or wherever they heard the story told them to do, with nothing resulting. They got bored, and being typical inebriated college kids, started taunting the supposed ghost of the mother. This continued for a few minutes before they tired, and decided to go back to the car as one of the girls had to go to the bathroom. Once they got back to the car, my friend, the sober driver, tried opening the handle without unlocking the car because he hadn't locked it in the first place, but found it locked. He attributed this to bad memory at the time. The group drove home, laughing and talking like normal. After he had dropped all the others off at their homes, he went back to his own house. He got in at the same time as one of his roommates, who stopped and waited for him to pull in. The roommate had his phone out and shined the light in the window when his friend pulled in as a joke. What he saw was tiny baby-sized handprints all over the windows. As soon as my friend got out, he went into the house without saying a word to the roommate. The roommate, confused, went back to the car and tried to rub one of the handprints. They were on the inside of the window. To this day, my friend will not speak of his drive home after he dropped off his other friends, and has since sold the car without ever driving it again. My own story. This one is from my own experience. I was driving home with a friend from a tournament we had gone to about 2 to 3 hours away. The whole weekend, it had been raining and storming very hard, and a lot of roads were flooded. This was Indiana, so a bunch of side roads and bridges were just gone. We had to reroute around 231, since a huge section of it was underwater. From where a river had flooded, we ended up going through a few side towns and back roads that were a lot higher elevation away from other bodies of water. We were driving through one small town, and I was navigating with the GPS in the car. I would glance at it every once in a while, but I was also paying attention to what was going on outside the car, as it was raining pretty heavily still. The GPS directed us on a road that connected up with a more main one, and we were driving on it just fine, when suddenly, my buddy slams on the brakes. We're in the middle of a graveyard, and the road just ends. I look down at the GPS and then show my buddy that the road continues straight on and straight back the way we came according to the GPS screen. He shrugs, turns around, and then we start back the way we came. Now, we had been telling ghost stories, and I was not at all sleepy or tired. We had driven on the one road the last 15 miles or so, directly through the town and on into the countryside before we encountered the graveyard. On the way back, we made 5 to 6 turns within this graveyard through which we had just come on a straight road that also suddenly spanned back a mile or so before finally getting back onto the straight road we thought we were on before. I looked at the GPS again, and it was rerouting. When it finished, the route it wanted us to take was make a U-turn and continue on County Road 200 in for 10 miles. We both turned around in our seats to confirm that we had indeed just driven through a huge graveyard, with many turns and twists in the road leading back into it. Instead, we saw the road dead-ended into a small graveyard. We immediately drove back to the town the opposite direction of the graveyard and took a different route home. Edit. IA. Word. Edit 2. I can't remember the actual name of the road we were on. I just picked a random country road for the GPS direction in my story. I don't think it actually said the name of it. It's awesome to see so much interest in the story, though. It was definitely one of the creepiest things I've experienced. Edit 3. The first story's graveyard cemetery sounds a lot like Step Cemetery. My friend is from Mitchell, and he said it was about an hour away, which checks out. It even has a story of a mother that it seems like I got slightly wrong in the retelling, thanks to all the people looking up. Details. The graveyard cemeteries in the stories are different. I have no idea what the second one was called, where exactly it was located on a map, just a general area to the west of Bloomington. Edit 4. Roommate. Thanks for that correction. Story 8. Okay. This happened to me when I was a junior in high school. It was December and it had just started snowing that evening. My best friend and I were in debate and getting ready for our state qualifiers that were the next day. We were writing our cases and, as usual, at each other's throats over the details of the cases. It was a stressful, tense evening. We finally finished our cases at about 3 a.m. Then we went to my room for the night. Almost as soon as we get into my room, we hear what sounds like the water turning on in the other end of the house. No big deal. Probably my parents, I think. Then we hear the front door open. I told her, I bet Mom woke up and wanted some fresh air. It made sense. I really thought that's what it was, until we heard incredibly heavy footsteps in my living room, headed for my room. They were not anyone in my family's footsteps. Then they stopped and my friend and I looked at each other and were both freaked out, just standing, frozen in my room. We walked closer to each other and the footsteps started again, but this time they were running toward us. We both flipped. We grabbed each other's hands out of fear and my bedroom door flew open. We both looked at the door. Nobody was there. We ran to the bathroom that's connected to my room. I locked the door and stood against it. When we finally got the balls to do it, we sprinted to my parents' room, crying and hysterical. We obviously startled my parents awake. They said neither of them had gotten up. My dad grabbed his gun and looked outside. No tracks in the snow, anywhere around our house. TLDR. Loud footsteps ran toward my room. Door opened. Nobody there. Wasn't my parents. Story 9. I heard this when I was in Korea. One day, a girl was walking home late night after work or something. It was dark and around midnight. She lived in an apartment where they had elevator. She got in the elevator, and when the door was about to close, a strange man with very red hoodie entered the elevator. He apologized for scaring her and asked which floor she is heading to, without making an eye contact. She told him, out of